The roots of prophecy and the early signs of Nostradamus. For ages, seers, mystics, and astrologers have endeavored to grasp the future of humanity, offering predictions and prophecies that range from vague to alarmingly precise. One of the most famous among them is Michel de Nostradame, popularly known as Nostradamus, a 16th century French seer whose quatrains, short cryptic verses, have stirred passionate debates for centuries. From medieval courts to modern-day analysts, people have endlessly scrutinized his words in an effort to discern hidden meanings about significant world events. Although some regard his work as a relic of the superstitious Middle Ages, others point to the number of events Nostradamus seems to have predicted with astonishing accuracy. The range of his forecasts is expansive, encompassing everything from political upheavals to natural catastrophes, and from the rise of famous historical figures to the fall of mighty regimes. In examining Nostradamus's background, one finds a blend of the scholarly and the arcane. Born in 1503 in Saint-Rémy-de-Provence, he initially trained as a physician assisting in the effort to treat plague victims. However, his fascination with astrology soon overtook his medical pursuits, and by the mid-16th century he had published Les Prophéties, a series of quatrains and predictions that captured the European imagination. It is this compilation that continues to draw the attention of researchers, historians, and enthusiasts across the globe. Many interpret these verses as coded references to major historical milestones, connecting them to events that range from the Great Fire of London in 1666 to the destructive potential of modern-day warfare. What endures is not merely the text itself, but the heated debates around it. Some readers frame it as pure coincidence, while others believe it is genuine evidence that Nostradamus caught glimpses of the future. Where the lines between superstition, insight, and coincidence blur, stories regarding Nostradamus's foresight assume a life of their own. According to popular belief, he may have foreseen calamities such as World War I and World War II, as well as the rise of figures like Adolf Hitler. Indeed, references in his quatrains to two powerful eagles locked in battle, staining the world red, have often been correlated with the ravages of 20th century global conflicts. Another quatrain mentions a destructive fire in a major city sometime in the mid-17th century, which skeptics and believers alike have linked to the 1666 Great Fire of London, ignited in a modest bakery and spreading to engulf most of the metropolis. These historical events have fueled the argument that Nostradamus was not simply a mystic dabbling in riddles, but rather a prophet able to tap into universal patterns of fate and consequence. Nevertheless, the enigma persists. If Nostradamus indeed managed to foresee specific major events, by what method did he accomplish this? Skeptics underscore that his language is riddled with allegories and open-ended phrases. They attribute his accurate predictions to broad interpretations, linguistic ambiguities, and after-the-fact matching of his verses to events. That said, curiosity around Nostradamus's works never truly dissipates. Even modern interpreters scour these ancient lines, convinced that warnings about our contemporary world are hidden within. More than 4 centuries on, it is not so much the nature of Nostradamus's predictions that captivates people, but the eerie feeling that his quatrains might continue to reveal themselves every time humanity is confronted by a moment of crisis or dramatic change. Central to the continued fascination with Nostradamus is how frequently his writings are said to mirror both past and present happenings. One of his most cited quatrains, for instance, alludes to a monarch's death and the conflagration of a city in the mid-17th century, well over a century after the seer's lifetime. Believers are quick to mention the year 1666, when a colossal blaze famously consumed 3/4 of London, originating in a small bakery on Pudding Lane. From there, the flames ravaged the city, leading to a humanitarian and cultural crisis. The shocking part advocates of Nostradamus argue is that he supposedly penned those words with enough specificity to lead later generations to interpret them as a prophecy of the Great Fire. Critics, however, have been equally vocal in pointing out that Nostradamus's phrasing is so intentionally vague. Speaking of burning cities, queens in peril, and catastrophic omens, that it becomes easy to attach such predictions to a variety of episodes across the centuries. Yet no matter the critics' positions, some predictions are difficult to brush aside once they gain traction. Another example is the alleged link between Nostradamus's words and Adolf Hitler, who is often referred to as the second Antichrist in interpretations of his texts. Many scholars of Nostradamus believe that the French seer predicted 3 key figures, or antichrists, who would each bring sweeping global conflicts and transformations. According to these interpretations, the first was Napoleon, while the second, Hitler, rose during the early 20th century, and indeed set in motion World War II and the Holocaust. The description of a leader in Europe who would be responsible for untold bloodshed has resonated strongly with historians, especially given Hitler's notorious record. Nostradamus's visibility soared again in modern times with references to the tragedy of President John F. Kennedy's assassination in 1963, the Challenger shuttle disaster in 1986, and even the atomic devastation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. It is crucial to note, however, that nowhere in his quatrains do we see direct mentions of these events by name or date. Instead, centuries-old lines about fiery destruction from above or sudden catastrophes befell by a great thunder in the sky are conveniently retrofitted to these incidents. Even so, when tragedy strikes, many people turn once again to Nostradamus's words, scrutinizing each line in search of a clue or explanation for the incomprehensible. This cyclical pattern, where major tragedies prompt a renewed interest in his cryptic works, demonstrates the extent to which humanity craves either a warning of events to come or a semblance of order in the chaos of history. In a world defined increasingly by scientific progress, global connectivity, and digital data, one might imagine that prophecy and centuries-old predictions would have little sway. Yet ironically, the 21st century has seen a re-emergence of Nostradamus's prophecies propelled by mass media and social networks, which swiftly circulate any claim that another of his forecasts has come true. For instance, when Queen Elizabeth II died at the age of 96 in 2022, it ignited another wave of fervor around Mario Reading's book, Nostradamus, The Complete Prophecies for the Future. Thousands rushed to obtain copies, enthralled by the notion that Nostradamus had predicted her age at death with startling precision. Whatever conclusions one draws, the repeated resurgence of Nostradamus's name reveals a timeless human inclination to look backward into obscure riddles for signs about what might come next. One of the most talked about elements in the Nostradamus narrative revolves around the papacy. While Europe's religious scene has been through countless changes since the seer's lifetime, the institution of the Pope still holds immense global influence. According to one of Nostradamus's manuscripts, often identified by scholars in reference to quatrains that hint at the Catholic Church, there was to come a time when a very old pope would pass away, just as the world was spiraling into intense unrest. The prophecy goes on to describe that upon this old pontiff's death, a middle-aged Roman would succeed him. Initially, these lines might seem too open to interpretation, but they have recently taken on a sharper focus for those who believe in the seer's prescience. In late 2025, the Catholic Church found itself rocked by the passing of Pope Francis, who had long been dealing with health complications. According to the prophecy, this elderly pope's demise would coincide with global challenges so immense that people would feel as though civilization itself was at a crossroads. Indeed, turmoil across political, environmental, and societal fronts has been intensifying, leading some to proclaim that Nostradamus was eerily accurate. The new pope described in the cryptic verse as someone who would weaken the papal seat, has fueled arguments that the Vatican itself is undergoing a profound identity crisis. Dwindling church attendances in Europe and North America, ideological rifts among senior clergy and controversies around the modernization of Catholic practices all underline the impression that this is no mere symbolic transition. Scholars dissecting Nostradamus's words claim that weakening the papal seat could mean a range of possibilities. It could reference declining moral authority or diminishing political relevance in the global arena. Others imagine it might signal a large-scale scandal that undermines public confidence in the Church. Throughout history, theological institutions have endured episodes of corruption, loss of trust, and far-reaching schisms. For those who take Nostradamus's prognostications seriously, these modern developments seem like the realization of a series of predicted tumultuous events for the Vatican. On the other hand, those more skeptical perceive it as a stretch suggesting that nearly any epical crisis in the Church could be fitted to a prophecy written almost 5 centuries ago. Yet one cannot deny that religious organizations across the globe are wrestling with forces that threaten their traditional roles in society. For the Catholic Church, the question of modernity has been contentious. Debates about the role of women, perspectives on sexual orientation, and stances on major geopolitical issues like immigration have created divisions among the faithful. As the Church seeks to remain relevant to younger generations shaped by digital culture, the emergence of a new pope does more than merely fill a vacancy. It could symbolically define the Church's trajectory, whether by bridging gaps or intensifying ideological divides. And in the background of all this, Nostradamus's words loom: "The old pontiff shall pass at a time of instability, only for a middle-aged successor to navigate treacherous waters." Whether it signifies the weakening of faith or a new chapter of renewal remains an open question, but the sense of a prophecy unraveling keeps curiosity piqued in the 21st century. Although Nostradamus's predictions appear to traverse a wide variety of topics, ranging from global pandemics to seismic shifts within powerful institutions, there is a recurring theme that unifies them: transformation coupled with instability. This notion is nowhere more evident than in the current period, which many interpret as the advent of unprecedented political change, environmental crises, and widespread disillusionment. Across the world, societal norms are being tested, and assumptions about governance, morality, and progress are being challenged. The writings of Nostradamus often speak in symbolism, invoking images of raging seas, broken crowns, and blood-stained fields, weaving a tapestry of doom and rebirth that resonates with those who feel the present moment is charged with existential urgency. Consider, for instance, the complexities around the Catholic Church's standing. From financial scandals to major debates about clerical conduct, the Vatican has faced repeated challenges to its image of moral leadership. Nostradamus's quatrains make repeated references to moral decay surfacing from within. Although it may be reductive to link such symbolic passages exclusively to the Church, their parallels with modern controversies have sparked fresh discussion about whether the new pope could herald a period of purification or a continuation of institutional strife. Even the mention that he shall reign long with patience and silence fuels speculation. Will the Catholic Church adopt a quieter, more restrained leadership style? Or does this line anticipate major schisms that force church leaders into silence? Moreover, Nostradamus's words about the final days of his life as the world descended into chaos and war resonate amid growing global anxiety. Nations across the globe find themselves confronting environmental catastrophes. Coastal regions threatened by rising sea levels, unprecedented storms, devastating communities, and droughts sparking conflict over water resources. Politically, the balance of power is in flux. Allies become rivals, and unexpected partnerships form reminiscent of Nostradamus's repeated references to unforeseen alliances shaping the destiny of empires. For modern readers, even those not prone to superstition, the correlation between looming environmental or political upheavals and the prophet's ambiguous lines is enough to raise an eyebrow. Whether one interprets these connections as verifiable predictions or mere coincidences might come down to personal belief systems. Spiritual traditions within Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, and Hinduism have long taught that the universe functions under cyclical patterns, each culminating in cataclysmic changes that pave the way for renewal. Nostradamus might merely be another voice in a millennia-old tradition of apocalyptic and redemptive literature. Yet his knack for capturing the public imagination stands out. Never explicit, always cryptic, he has become the poster figure for prophecy in Western culture, a name so enduring that it surfaces whenever the wind of potential disaster begins to blow. And so, as we transition into what many are calling a critical decade for humanity, Nostradamus's claims about the Pope, the Church, and an era of spiritual questioning are again at center stage. With Pope Francis's passing still echoing through the corridors of the Vatican, people watch intently to see how his successor will navigate these chaotic waters. Whether it is the supernatural fulfillment of a centuries-old prophecy or simply the natural product of contemporary turmoil, the resonance remains potent. It is within this climate that we move on to examine the broader stage of predictions where not only religious institutions, but also monarchies and political structures find themselves susceptible to the shifting winds of fate as Nostradamus's alleged prophecies continue to circle through public consciousness. Monarchy, power struggles, and the shifting winds of political fortune. No empire, dynasty, or monarchy has been entirely immune to the test of time. The British monarchy, in particular, has stood as one of the most iconic institutions in the Western world for centuries. From Queen Elizabeth III to Queen Elizabeth II, the lineage of Britain's rulers has carried an air of both tradition and adaptability, surviving revolutions, world wars, and the changing sentiments of its subjects. Yet if Nostradamus's writings are to be believed, even this enduring institution may one day confront a level of turmoil and reconfiguration unlike anything witnessed before. And according to some interpreters, that time might be happening right now. In recent years, the royal family has undergone significant changes. The death of Queen Elizabeth II at age 96, which many tie to Nostradamus's prophecies, served as a watershed moment. The final years of her reign were marked by the challenges of a modernizing society, the public scrutiny of royal expenses, and the personal controversies within the family itself. Upon her passing, attention turned to King Charles III, who had waited longer than any heir apparent in British history to ascend the throne. Charles's coronation, initially celebrated as a symbol of continuity, took on a more complicated tone when public concerns about his health began to surface. By early 2024, the palace's official acknowledgement that the king was receiving treatment for cancer brought forward anxious questions about the monarchy's near future. Here, Nostradamus's quatrains once again found new life. One of the lines attributed to him reads, "The King of the Isles shall be cast down by an outside force. The successor shall be one who bears no mark of kingship." While skeptics claim it is foolhardy to link centuries-old verses to present-day events, more imaginative minds wasted no time drawing parallels. Could the outside force be an illness or a political wave from abroad, moreover? Who is the figure without a mark of kingship? Traditional assumptions might point to Prince William next in line. Yet authors like Mario Reading, who rose to prominence with a renewed interest in Nostradamus's predictions, posited an astonishing theory that the prophecy may indicate Prince Harry, the younger son of King Charles III, who famously relinquished his senior royal duties and relocated to the United States. The puzzling possibility of Harry, once considered an unlikely future monarch stepping up to the throne, seized headlines. Although some called it far-fetched, the concept is not without intrigue given Harry's break from traditional protocols. He bears in a sense no mark of kingship, having renounced the styling and daily responsibilities expected of a senior royal. Meanwhile, controversies surrounding Charles and Camilla, lingering discontent among certain portions of the public, and the swirling rumors about Charles's deteriorating health, all combined into a narrative that for some seemed to echo Nostradamus's cryptic lines. Skeptics, as always, respond that the monarchy has been through countless crises, abdications, divorces, and tragedies that overshadow the present uncertainty. But that has not stopped believers from highlighting these coincidences as evidence that Nostradamus's influence lingers in the halls of Buckingham Palace. For those enamored with predictions, the possibility of a massive shift in the royal order also raises questions about what that change might entail for the United Kingdom as a whole. Could a sudden shake-up in the line of succession spark a renewed Republican movement? Might public dissatisfaction with the complexities of royal finances or perceived archaic customs intensify calls for constitutional reform? Nostradamus's references to a time of trembling thrones have been interpreted, broadly suggesting that when a monarchy is in crisis, the larger social structure it represents is placed under scrutiny. Historically, the British monarchy has weathered intense storms, internal strife, external conflicts, and the mounting pressure of a modern, media-saturated world. Yet some argue that in the digital age, royal mystique has diminished. Whenever a crisis befalls the royals, a scandalous interview, a tell-all memoir, or even conflicting narratives about health concerns social media ignites, and the monarchy faces an ever more rigorous public examination. Nostradamus's mention of a king of the Isles cast down could easily be read metaphorically. Social media storms and global news coverage might be that outside force fracturing the carefully managed image of regal authority. In an era where social perception can shift in a matter of days, monarchy has had to adapt or risk fading into anachronism. Looking back through European history, royalty has often been a symbol of unity for nations. The fall of a monarch or the dethronement of a royal line could unleash chaos, but it could also pave the way for radical political evolutions. It is not hard to see parallels between historical tipping points such as the English Civil War in the 17th century, or the eventual independence movements in colonial territories, and the potential for new kinds of upheaval today. If King Charles III's health forces him to abdicate or significantly reduce his royal duties, the transition of power might be smoother than at any prior epoch thanks to constitutional frameworks. But the swirling prophecies about Nostradamus add an air of the dramatic, highlighting the deep human inclination to see profound meaning in times of crisis. Still, it remains vital to remember that prophecy works in broad strokes. Dissecting centuries-old cryptic lines and applying them to modern events is an inherently subjective activity. For every suggestion that Prince Harry could supplant his father or brother in the monarchy, there are historians, linguists, and rationalists who maintain that such a reading is just one of many possible interpretations. Some argue that Nostradamus's lines about a king of the Isles might refer to a different monarchy altogether, or that bears no mark of kingship, is figurative rather than literal. Even so, it is precisely the openness of Nostradamus's words, his symbolic language, and layered hints that keeps people enthralled, permitting them to align nearly any major political or monarchical transition with his seemingly inexhaustible quatrains. The link between prophecy and monarchy does not exclusively revolve around who sits on the throne. It also delves into broader questions of power identity and national destiny. The monarchy in many countries symbolizes heritage stability and continuity. When Nostradamus's verses hint at a cataclysmic turn of events, whether through betrayal, death, or illness, people interpret these forecasts as applying to the entire nation, not just the royal family. The fact that Prince Harry chose to depart from his official role as a senior royal, settling in the United States with his wife, Meghan Markle, provided a compelling real-life narrative that syncs uncannily with the idea of one who bears no mark of kingship. By opting out of certain royal obligations and duties, he carved out an unprecedented path for a modern British prince, leaving the monarchy more vulnerable to speculation about its future shape. Moreover, Harry's position has stirred debates on class, race, and tradition within the UK and beyond. The modern era demands transparency, and the royals find themselves continually justifying time-honored protocols to an increasingly critical public. Could it be that Nostradamus was not referring to a literal dethronement, but rather a symbolic fracturing of monarchy's image in the eyes of its own people? The push and pull between upholding monarchical tradition and adapting to societal shifts has never been more publicly visible. Protests against the cost of royal events or demands for a more democratic approach to choosing heads of state are growing, if not in overwhelming numbers, then at least in vocal fervor. Within the global stage, another intriguing context arises: the monarchy's foreign ties. The UK remains part of the Commonwealth, a group of nations primarily composed of former territories of the British Empire. As generational attitudes evolve, member countries question whether they still wish to pledge allegiance to a distant monarch. Nostradamus's cryptic statements about force from outside might point not just to illness or personal scandal, but to international political pressures that could theoretically erode the monarchy's standing. If multiple Commonwealth nations simultaneously opted to sever ties with the Crown, the monarchy's sphere of influence, historically far-reaching, would undeniably shrink. Likewise, as political alliances and blocs shift worldwide, the notion of monarchy may become increasingly out of step with modern governance in some observers' eyes. The monarchy has long operated as both a ceremonial emblem and an anchor for collective identity. If Nostradamus foresaw a scenario where external forces cast down the king, it could reflect an era in which the monarchy's ceremonial duties become overshadowed by a global trend of populism, nationalism, or outright rejection of hereditary rule. Taken to its extreme, one might speculate that a major controversy, either financial or personal, might indeed precipitate a steep decline in the monarchy's stature. Yet all of these remain interpretations, and the real future of the British Crown will likely depend on factors Nostradamus never could have envisioned: widespread digital information, social media activism, and swiftly changing public sentiment in an interconnected world. Still, the monarchy is only one part of a much larger tapestry of global transformations that Nostradamus's quatrains appear to address. The synergy between religious shifts in the Vatican and the potential for upheaval in Britain's royal line paints a portrait of a world on the cusp of pivotal realignments. Traditional pillars, be they sacred institutions like the papacy, or cultural pillars like royalty, are being tested. This dynamic fosters a sense of collective uncertainty, prompting people to revisit ancient texts and alleged prophecies in search of insight, warning, or reassurance. One cannot ignore the psychological impact of prophecy. When esteemed institutions show signs of vulnerability, society at large responds by searching historical or esoteric sources for an overarching logic. Questions about whether these changes are part of a predestined cycle or random events reflect a timeless human longing for pattern and purpose. Nostradamus, writing at a time of religious conflict and political upheaval in 16th century Europe, may have sensed universal archetypes: the frail throne, the aging leader, and the younger challenger waiting in the wings. His cryptic style allows these archetypes to be continuously repurposed, applying to popes, monarchs, and entire nations under stress. Meanwhile, the modern world's complexities only heighten the relevance people attach to prophecy. Geopolitical tensions are rising in multiple regions. Climate change is reshaping landscapes, and economies are interlinked to a degree that a crisis in one corner of the world can rapidly reverberate everywhere else. Against this backdrop, the idea that Nostradamus forecast a perfect storm where both the Roman Catholic Church and the British monarchy face simultaneous trials gains an allure. Whether viewed as a cautionary tale, a symbolic narrative of cyclical change, or a literal blueprint of things to come, the synergy of these potential crises captivates the imagination of believers and skeptics alike. On a personal level, many individuals look to prophecy during times of global or personal crisis, finding a semblance of comfort in the possibility that events, however chaotic, might fit into a larger cosmic scheme. For devout believers, Nostradamus's words serve as a reminder of the spiritual dimension of history, one that suggests moral lessons or divine patterns at work. For rationalists, the phenomenon of prophecy is a fascinating study in how humans impose structure on random occurrences. In either case, the conversation around the monarchy's future and the Church's evolving leadership is linked to deeper reflections on authority, legacy, and collective identity. These threads of inquiry weave throughout the final section, where the specter of conflict on a global scale combined with dire ecological portents stands at the forefront of Nostradamus's and other prophets' most ominous visions. Global conflicts, Earth's wrath, and the specter of the Antichrist. In many ways, the most disturbing aspect of Nostradamus's quatrains is his repeated allusion to large-scale wars that engulf entire continents and perhaps the whole planet. The 20th century already witnessed two devastating world wars, the likes of which left deep scars on civilization. And for those who read prophecy into the French seer's words, it is entirely feasible that he foresaw an even more catastrophic global conflict looming in humanity's future. A common theme in modern interpretations of his verses points toward the red enemy rising in the east, often taken as a reference to China, whose association with the color red is both historical and symbolic. Recent geopolitical events have done little to assuage such concerns. Tensions in the South China Sea, disputes surrounding Taiwan, and a pattern of military expansion have underscored the possibility of a major conflict in East Asia. Western nations, particularly the United States and its allies, keep a watchful eye on these developments, wary of miscalculations that could ignite a chain reaction of military engagements. Nostradamus, writing in an age when such large-scale conflicts were unimaginable, employed the imagery of oceans roaring and coastlines trembling in some of his more vivid quatrains. When applied to the modern stage, these lines carry unsettling relevance, envisioning maritime disputes, naval confrontations, and new theaters of war. If one believes in the cyclical nature of history, then perhaps a confrontation involving global superpowers, each equipped with nuclear arsenals, represents the darkest iteration of the tragedies humanity has repeatedly inflicted upon itself. Yet global war is only one part of the threatened scenario. Environmental calamities, economic turmoil, and social strife could compound one another, creating a sense of a perfect storm reminiscent of eschatological texts from various religious traditions. In the Christian framework, the Book of Revelation features 4 horsemen, each representing a different manifestation of devastation, conquest, war, famine, and death. Some theologians, in line with Nostradamus's ominous predictions, see parallels between modern events and these biblical symbols. Violent conflicts, widespread disease, dwindling natural resources, and political fragmentation are woven into the fabric of headlines every day. The bridging of Nostradamus's texts with biblical prophecy intensifies the sense that current events might form part of a grand narrative culminating in apocalyptic change. For instance, Nostradamus's references to blood and fire, or summers that scorch and winters that freeze beyond measure, align with concerns about climate change. World leaders gather in forums like the United Nations to debate carbon emissions and the future of sustainable energy. Yet solutions remain contentious and incomplete. Catastrophic hurricanes, unprecedented flooding, and raging wildfires remind us that nature's fury can be as destructive as any military conflict. Thus, the stage on which Nostradamus's alleged final war might unfold is complicated by environmental vulnerability, fueling deeper anxieties about how conflict over resources could ignite a worldwide blaze. Crucial to the broader narrative of war and chaos is the idea of an ultimate evil figure, which Nostradamus famously articulated through the concept of three antichrists. According to many interpretations, the first was Napoleon, whose campaigns reshaped Europe's map at the cost of countless lives. The second was Adolf Hitler, whose genocidal policies and militaristic ambitions plunged the world into the deadliest conflict in human history. Now the question lingers, who is the third? Or more hauntingly, could that individual have already emerged? Many public figures have been scrutinized under this lens, from political leaders who espouse extreme ideologies to wealthy tech magnates, suspected of manipulating global events for personal gain. Nostradamus describes this Antichrist figure as someone possessing immense charisma, intelligence, and the ability to sway large masses through skillful oratory. This person is said to lead humanity down a path of unprecedented destruction, culminating in a conflict that dwarfs all that came before. Although the prophet gives no specific name or country of origin, the when of this figure's rise is often associated with modern times, when global communication allows a single voice to echo almost instantly around the globe. The potential link to the biblical Antichrist is obvious. In Christian eschatology, the Antichrist is portrayed as a deceitful ruler who emerges at a time of moral and spiritual crisis, luring vast populations into supporting or worshipping him. As institutional confidence declines in governments, religious bodies, and even scientific expertise, some argue that societies become more susceptible to a persuasive, ruthless leader, promising to restore glory or stability. Nostradamus's emphasis on cunning manipulation resonates with an era in which misinformation and propaganda can spread globally in a matter of hours. Still, these interpretations face fierce critique. The notion that one individual can singularly orchestrate a global downfall may seem theatrical, especially in a world of international treaties, interdependent economies, and nuclear deterrence. But believers in prophecy counter that such checks and balances could fall apart in times of extreme crisis, say after a devastating natural disaster or an explosive military confrontation, allowing a figure with sweeping authority to ascend and shape a new world order. The complexity of modern geopolitics arguably lends itself to opportunistic strongmen, many of whom use technology and mass media to galvanize large swaths of the population. If we consider Nostradamus's cryptic lines about cunning orators and catastrophic outcomes, it is easy to see how these narratives continue to resonate, especially when global tensions flare or major elections prompt polarizing rhetoric. While no consensus exists regarding the identity of this so-called third Antichrist, the prophecy's hold on the collective psyche endures. Each new generation confronting unique perils seems to find an echo of Nostradamus's dark vision in real-world figures or events. Whether the prophecy is a warning about the dangers of absolute power or a timeless cautionary tale about human susceptibility to manipulation, it remains central to contemporary discussions on prophecy and the possibility of catastrophic conflict. In addition to conflict, both Nostradamus and another prominent visionary, Baba Vanga, warned of Earth's intensifying fury as a key hallmark of the times ahead. Nostradamus wrote of a great wave bringing famine and death that would inundate coastal communities. For many, these verses speak to rising sea levels, the aftermath of severe storms, and the urgent fear that climate change could devastate entire regions. Meanwhile, farmland across the globe faces crises from drought-stricken fields in Africa to soil erosion in parts of Asia and the Americas. Famine, once a diminishing threat in certain parts of the world, has resurfaced due to unpredictable weather patterns and war-torn supply chains, pushing vulnerable populations closer to the brink. Baba Vanga, the Bulgarian mystic who gained attention for numerous accurate predictions, left behind a similarly grim outlook for the year 2025, including economic collapse, intensified natural disasters, and a shift in Earth's orbit. While the latter claim sparks skepticism among many scientists, Vanga's broader concerns about a rapidly changing climate and global instability mirror those found in Nostradamus's quatrains. Both prophecies converge on the notion that nature itself will become humanity's harshest adversary. Earthquakes, tsunamis, and floods are not simply random disasters. In prophetic literature, they often carry a moral dimension, implying that humanity's lack of harmony with the environment invites punishment. Recent tremors and quakes in Myanmar, violent storms battering the Gulf Coast of the United States, and the incremental but alarming rise in ocean temperatures might appear as signposts of prophecy. Even those who reject mystical explanations acknowledge that environmental degradation, overpopulation, and technological hazards such as nuclear power plant failures present genuine existential risks. Nostradamus specifically mentions a catastrophic earthquake that shakes the world with massive casualties. In a world with densely populated megacities built in earthquake-prone areas, one large tremor can indeed result in unprecedented devastation, turning prophecy into a scenario as plausible as it is terrifying. Yet amid the doomsday scenarios, glimmers of optimism do emerge from both Nostradamus and Baba Vanga. The latter spoke of breakthroughs in medicine, including potential cures for diseases once believed incurable. Reports that Russia has been developing a revolutionary vaccine targeting various forms of cancer coincide intriguingly with Baba Vanga's forecasts about advanced medical innovations around this time. Additionally, developments in artificial intelligence and quantum computing hint at transformative possibilities. If harnessed responsibly, these technological leaps could help solve environmental issues, improve food distribution, and facilitate global cooperation, tempering the gloomier predictions of worldwide disaster. Whether or not one believes these alignments are orchestrated by prophecy, they raise the prospect that human agency and innovative spirit can intervene in what might otherwise be a trajectory of doom. Nostradamus's verses, though ominous, often come couched in the notion that free will has a role to play. The idea that we are not merely victims of fate but architects of our destiny resonates today. Even the direst predictions can serve as clarion calls, urging societies, governments, and individuals to unite around sustainable practices, equitable policies, and humanitarian endeavors that might forestall the harshest of these prophecies from manifesting in full. Ultimately, the significance of Nostradamus's predictions and those of other mystics like Baba Vanga lies not only in whether they literally come true, but in how they shape our collective consciousness. In times of heightened volatility, people often revisit ancient texts in search of clarity or validation for their fears. Wars, political upheaval, religious transitions, and environmental crises converge into a narrative that seems too vast and complex for anyone to fully comprehend without resorting to metaphors of prophecy or the archetypes of end-time scenarios found in religious lore. Nostradamus's continuing relevance exemplifies this phenomenon. His cryptic couplets retain their allure because they resonate with the archetypal themes of downfall, rebirth, and the interplay of good and evil. Considering current global dynamics, it is easy to see why these prophecies strike a chord. The Catholic Church grapples with internal divisions and the selection of a new pope who must guide 1 billion followers through an era of moral and ideological fragmentation. The British monarchy enters a phase of uncertainty with King Charles III's health issues and Prince Harry's estrangement, prompting public speculation that might otherwise have seemed ludicrous. The specter of superpower conflict looms in East Asia, recalling Nostradamus's references to a great war rising from the sea. Catastrophic weather events and seismic disruptions mirror his descriptions of a planet groaning under humanity's excesses. And beneath it all, the notion of an ultimate evil figure, or third Antichrist, hovers like a dark star on the horizon, capturing imaginations despite its elusive identity. Yet it is worth reiterating that prophecy, in any traditional sense, rarely functions as a straightforward timeline of future events. Instead, it speaks to patterns, potentials, and archetypes that repeat through history. In the final analysis, the debate surrounding Nostradamus underscores a tension between determinism and free will. Are we compelled to follow a path forecast centuries ago, or can we learn from these warnings, real or imagined, to alter our collective trajectory? Technology, international diplomacy, and increased awareness of our planet's fragility could, in theory, break cycles of war and exploitation. Cultural shifts in favor of empathy, collaboration, and ethical responsibility might counterbalance the doomsday predictions of older prophecies. In the end, what Nostradamus and Baba Vanga both achieved was less about enumerating inevitable events and more about sharpening our awareness that the future is not guaranteed to be stable or benign. Their works invite reflection, conversation, and sometimes action. Whether one sees them as mystics with genuine insight or as figures whose riddles conveniently adapt to any era of crisis, the key takeaway remains the same. Every generation inherits the responsibility to shape its destiny. Perhaps that is why the final lines of Nostradamus's quatrains often inspire renewed study whenever humanity finds itself at a crossroads. If these texts push us to examine our choices more carefully, to mitigate conflict, to protect the environment, and to uphold justice, then they serve a meaningful purpose, even if their literal prophecies prove half true, symbolic, or purely coincidental. As we conclude this extensive exploration of Nostradamus's prophecies encompassing the death of popes, the succession of monarchs, the specter of global warfare, and the dual threats of natural disaster and an ultimate evil figure, we stand reminded of the fragile balance underpinning human civilization. Questions abound. Will we see more upheavals that seemingly validate these centuries-old words, or will humanity chart a new course that diffuses the very crises the seer described? The answers, perhaps, are unwritten. What is certain is that the words of Nostradamus continue to echo across time, stirring the human imagination and urging each of us to grapple with possibilities that lie well beyond the horizon of immediate comprehension. And as he himself might have said, only time will tell which interpretations prove truly prophetic.